Well, on the investment side, it has been very volatile and mostly to the downside for 2022. It's also forced many crypto firms into either financial difficulties or race them off the map altogether. Bitcoin itself has struggled to stay above 20,000, but one crypto company in Canada is still standing and in fact is growing. Ledn, they're a Canadian company offering Bitcoin-backed loans and savings. For more on weathering this crypto winter, we've got Maurizio Di Bartolomeo. He's the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Ledn. Thanks so much for being with us, Maurizio. Let's just be really clear about what Ledn does when we're talking about Bitcoin-backed lending.
Yeah, so Ledn, it's great to be here. Great to see you again. Ledn is a financial services company for Bitcoin and digital asset holders. We, as you mentioned, offer Bitcoin-backed loans. That is our flagship product and what most people know us for. These are dollar loans backed by your Bitcoin as collateral. And then we also offer Bitcoin savings accounts and USDC savings accounts. USDC is a US dollar stablecoin or US dollar on crypto rails. And effectively, in those two services, on the savings accounts, we pay interest for both Bitcoin deposits and USDC deposits.
And what is that interest level?
The interest level is on US dollar or US dollar tokens, it is 8%, and on Bitcoin, it is 6%, up to the first 0.1 Bitcoin, 2% on balances above that. But there's a very clear way on how we make that 8% and pay it out, which is very different and distinct to the activities that many of these other lenders that are no longer with us used to do.
Well, let's talk about those parameters that you put around it, because this seems like a sector and a recipe for a blow up, and we have seen that. I was just talking about Celsius. What do you do that the Celsius and other networks don't do?
That's a great question, and it's a bit of a long answer, but I'll try to keep it brief. So for one is our underwriting standards for our institutional counterparties are much more stringent. We are one of the only lenders, if not the only one, that did not lend to Three Arrows, a now bankrupt lender in the space.
So you don't lend to hedge funds?
We lend to delta neutral market makers that do not take directional exposure on the markets, and we do not lend to people that turn around and then lend those coins to someone else. A big part of how we underwrite is understanding what people or what these institutions or entities are doing with these assets. So we get their financials, we interview their management, we look at their trading strategies, we test their trading strategies, and then once we can get comfortable, we can underwrite credit to these institutions. But again, we did not, the Three Arrows in particular did not tick our boxes, and that's why we were not exposed to them. We also don't expose client assets to decentralized finance, so we weren't impacted by Terra, Luna, or any of these bridge hacks that you hear often about in DeFi. So effectively that, and we were the first Bitcoin-backed lender to bring in an accountant. Every 6 months we bring in our Marino LLP, which has a proof of reserves attestation, which effectively then they go through all of our balances on exchanges, on custody, on lending partners, and they go through all of our client liabilities. And every 6 months they ensure that we have more assets than we need to cover our liabilities. And every one of our clients can verify that we reported their balances correctly to our Marino. And most recently, we just appointed Deloitte as our external audit partner, which I think is a testament to sort of our, how we've run the business so far.
So all of that ensures that nothing goes wrong and that there's a lot of transparency, yet you are operating in a down market. How does that affect excuse me, how does that affect growth at your company?
So it's interesting to speak about growth in terms of Bitcoin and digital assets, because if you look at places that are not Canada and the United States, they are in fact, their currencies are getting destroyed. I would argue that even the Canadian dollar is taking a big hit, down 6%. So the people that are using our savings accounts today, not only the Canadians that are using our savings accounts today, not only have protected themselves against the devaluation between the US dollar and Canadian dollar, they've also continued to earn that interest at 8%, which again is higher than Canadian inflation rate.
Right.
And the reason we can pay that 8% is because the people that borrow those dollars through the Bitcoin-backed loans pay a rate of 7.9% plus a 2% admin fee. So primarily the biggest avenue which we generate the interest for the US dollar savings accounts are these Bitcoin-backed loans that are backed 2-to-1 by Bitcoin, and we've processed over $500 million worth of these loans since inception. We haven't lost a penny.
Okay, so but 2-to-1 Bitcoin sounds good, but when you look at these big market downswings, I mean, how do you feel confident that you have that covered, that that's a good enough ratio?
So our system is built in a way that, again, we take 2-to-1 collateral, and as the price of that collateral drops, given the market fluctuations, that LTV, the loan to value of those loans, changes. So our system basically automatically tracks every loan's collateral relative to every loan's outstanding amount. And then when the value of the collateral reaches a level close to the amount we lent, which is 80% loan to value, it liquidates the loan instantly, basically to protect Ledn and to protect the people that provided that US dollar capital. So since we started the business, we haven't lost a dime. The system has worked, as designed, and it's protected. It does close a loan, which is unfortunate for the borrower and for us because we do want to keep loans open, but it ensures that the business is sustainable in the long term, and we don't get into the situations that some other lenders just did.
You've raised a lot of money for growth as well, over $100 million, and you created this. You're an entrepreneur behind this. You've seen it through the trenches, the good times and the bad. And I love hearing people's crypto origin stories. What is yours? Is it because you come from a place where financial security and safety was not a given?
Yeah, and as I'm listening to Mr. Polotz, it's interesting to hear people talk about Bitcoin and the promise or the technology or who it will be helping, and you don't have the context of having been born and raised in Latin America. So I was born into double-digit inflation.
In Venezuela.
In Venezuela, yeah, that's where I'm from. I've seen 14 zeros wiped out from my currency renamed 3 times. I found Bitcoin at a time when our money was broken, and we didn't have any options left. That's when my family starts mining. And when I saw what Bitcoin was doing for Venezuelans is when I became enamored with what it could do for everybody outside of a reserve currency world. 87% of the world lives without democracy and without a stable currency. And these are the places that you see constantly in these Chainalysis adoption indexes that are using Bitcoin the most. It's China, it's it's Venezuela, it's Argentina, it's Colombia, it's Chile. It's the people that don't have access to stable currencies. And that's the market that we focus in. Over half of our business at Ledn comes from Latin America. And I believe that the promise and the problems that Bitcoin is solving and US dollar stablecoins are solving in that part of the world are very different than the problems that it's solving here. In here, most people see it as an investment, one more tool to have on their portfolio. And on that note, for the Canadian value proposition for crypto asset investments is different than I would argue the Latin American value proposition. We also cater to North American investors, Canada and the US. We just announced an acquisition for Arch Novum, which is a registered investment manager here in Canada, which again will further accelerate our posture here. That transaction is subject to regulatory approval, but once it is through, it will unlock our ability for us to offer a new wealth of services for these types of investors.